The cam and lifter failure demon strikes again. And this time, the victim is my buddy Dan, D&D Speed Shop, up in Canada. If you're not familiar with these guys, it's Dan and his girlfriend Danny, greatest people in the world. They run a small shop out of their house in Canada, and he does all kinds of fantastic work. This is truly like the hands-on home guy, right? If you're not subscribed to him, just take my word for it. Just go over there and subscribe. You will not be disappointed. So here's the story. Dan actually, he does a lot of 4-door to 2-door conversions. He works mostly with Tri-5 Chevys. And in fact, it was his 4-door to 2-door conversion stuff that was the inspiration to do that on Sledgehammer. I was like, well, if Dan can make 4-door into 2-door, I can do it too. He does a better job. But nevertheless, this time around, he did a 4-door to 2-door conversion on a mid-60s Chevy. And he wanted just to hop up the motor. It was a big block Chevy, and he wanted to just hop up a little bit with the typical bolt-ons: cam, intake, header, carburetor. So he does this. And he puts the engine together, goes to put the cam through its Breakin procedure, and about halfway through the Breakin procedure, he starts to hear the clack of doom. All right. So you pop a valve cover off, find a couple of loose rockers, adjust the rockers down. And now I'm watching the video. He posted this a couple of weeks ago. I'm watching the video, and I could see as the engine is running that, and I wasn't the only one who saw it. Lots of people saw it. I could see as the engine was running that the number 8 exhaust rocker wasn't quite moving the way it should, right? And I got my fingers and toes crossed for this guy. I hope this is going to work out, but I don't have a good feeling about this. All right. Well, as it turned out, it did wipe out the cam. And he just posted a video today on the autopsy that he did. So here's the thing with this, okay? In his video that he just posted today, he's showing all of the lifters. He's showing the damaged lifters as they're coming out of the engine, right? And one of them he caught at literally the exact instant of failure. So now usually when these cams go bad, when a lifter goes bad, cam goes bad, there's carnage, okay? Typically you'll see a round lobe and the lifter all dug out. On this one though, a couple of the lifters were like that. But on this particular lifter, it was caught, the engine was shut off, like literally at the exact instant of failure. Right? If this thing had run, listen to me, if it had run for like another 5 minutes, it would have been too late. You wouldn't have been able to see what I see in this picture. So we'll put the shot of this lifter up now. All right, so now what do you see here? Look at the witness mark from the lobe through the center of the lifter, that stripe. Now the thing that jumped out to me, as soon as I saw it, the thing that jumped out was that it's even. The witness mark is even from side to side. Now, what does that tell you? Now, ironically enough, about a month ago, we did a video on reading camshaft wear patterns, how to look at a used cam or cam that's been run and make sure that it's mating correctly with the lifter. And that's that mating, that pattern that promotes the rotation of the lifter. And the rotation of the lifter is what keeps it from wearing. So, just to recap, in case you guys missed any of this stuff or you're not familiar with the exact things that we're talking about here, let me go on and show you. So, and I'm going to exaggerate this motion here, or this positioning, but the lifter does not ride flat on the cam lobe. The lifter rides on an angle like this. Now, obviously, this is a gross exaggeration. We're talking about just a couple of thousandths of an inch. But this is what the effect that you're looking for. So that as the cam is rotating, it's pushing on the edge of the lifter and forcing the lifter to rotate. So you've only got metal-to-metal contact. In theory, in a perfect world, you've only got metal-to-metal contact at the very outside of the cam lobe and only on the outside of the lifter. Now, this is achieved 2 ways. The first is that the lifter is ground with a crown, okay? So while to the naked eye, it looks like a flat surface, it's actually ground like this, okay? And the way you would check that There's two ways, really. You could use a straight edge, lay the straight edge across, like so, and make sure that you can rock it back and forth. So clearly this has got some crown to it. Or you can take a second lifter, put it face to face, just like this, and be able to rock it back and forth. Okay, so the difference here from the center to the outside is probably about a thousandth and a half of an inch. Of course, you could measure also. You could put a caliper on here or a micrometer on here and measure the center. But regardless, you get the idea. It has to have a crown. The lobe has to have taper. So you can measure it. You could use a caliper or you could use a micrometer. Okay, and you want to measure from one edge of the lobe to the other edge of the lobe. And there should be a difference. They're all a little bit different, but approximately 0.03 of an inch height difference between here and here. And it's those two factors that keep the lifter off the center of the lobe and promote the rotation. But now, when we look at Dan's lifter, we see an even stripe right through the center of the lifter, which means that the lobe was hitting that lifter square. If the lifter was ground without a crown, you would see a similar mark, but it would be biased to one side. Now, if you look at it, you see the center of it, the discolored part, is where the crown of the lifter would be. That's the hottest area. It's where the most discoloration is. But you could also see on the outsides, the outer edges of that witness mark, is a fairly even black stripe. If there was a correct amount, or if there was any amount of taper ground into that lobe, you would see it would be there in the witness mark. The black outer edges or the dark outer edges, one side would be very dark and the other side would either be very light or non-existent, but they're even from side to side. So this was, like I said, he shut the engine down probably within a minute or two of it being like past the point of no return, like where you wouldn't really be able to tell what happened. It would just be gouged into the lifter and the lobe itself would be round. But that particular one was caught right exactly at the instant of failure. So you gotta check everything. Now, I'm not claiming by any stretch of the imagination that all of these cam and lifter failures are based on bad lobe taper. This particular one is definitely based on bad lobe taper. I've seen bad lifters. I've had lifters, I've showed them on this channel. I've bought new lifters that didn't have any crown on them. They were just ground completely flat. Right? That'll give you, it's obviously a problem, but not nearly the problem as a lack of taper in the lobe. Now, I've also seen soft lifters. People, where the lobe is okay. Even after the lifter's failed, you can still see the lobe is still basically intact, but the lifter is just dug out. So there's all different factors. It's not just one thing. And I know a lot of guys, I see it already in the comments, you got to use the right oil. Yeah, we all know about the right oil. Dan used a zinc oil, a heavy zinc oil. I've always used a heavy zinc oil. And the numerous other YouTubers and engine builders that have had this problem publicly over the last couple of years all followed these procedures. We know what we're doing, right? This is we've done this before, not the first rodeo. So you just take it for granted that all of the procedures, all of the precautions, all of the checks were made. Perhaps we didn't check the lobe taper on this particular instance. And I mean, it's the kind of thing I never, up until I had the second failure, up until the second failure, I never bothered checking any of this stuff because it was unheard of. You built engines for decades and never had a problem, never had a cam go bad. But all of a sudden, bam, I'm having cams go bad. Everybody's having cams go bad. It's all over the place. And everybody's having it in different intervals. Some of them, they fail on the break-in, like Dan's did. Some of them, it's after 500 miles. Some of them, it's like 2,000 miles. But it's a very short period of time before this thing just wipes itself out. And we've seen evidence of all different situations. But I can tell you for sure, in this particular one, Dan's example, that lobe is ground without taper. the witness marks are right there. So, and again, the lifters, I've seen soft lifters. It's like they're actually made out of wontons. They compress them down and call it a lifter. You gotta check everything. And I've said it before, your best bet with lifters is find NOS, old lifters. You find them on eBay, you can find them in all different places, but try to find lifters that were manufactured, let's say in the 70s, 80s, 90s, up until like the very early 2000s. Anything newer than 2000, I would be really, really wary of. But if you can find stock from, let's say, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, you're good to go. You got some good metal there and you know it. You don't have to worry about it. And as far as the camshafts go, check the taper. Take your time and check the taper. And don't just check one lobe and say, oh, it's good. Check all of them. Check all of the lobes. Because, you never know. You got 15 that are perfect and one that's just flat. And then the next thing you know, you have this situation where it's just gouging out the center of the lifter because there's no rotation. Dan, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I have been through it myself. It sucks so much. So, hope you got something out of that, guys. Check everything and, good luck. I mean, seriously, right? Because that's what it takes these days. Good luck. I'll see you tomorrow.